Lance Stroll completed only 11 laps before Aston Martin's biggest upgrade of the season suffered a suspected left rear suspension failure. His car spun between turns 2 and 3, triggered a red flag, and could not be repaired in time for second practice. Then the situation became even more alarming. Fernando Alonso was told to avoid the curbs, reported vibrations throughout his program, and Aston Martin admitted it did not yet know whether Stroll could complete the weekend. The 16-part package was supposed to begin Adrian Newey's rescue mission. Instead, its first major test may have exposed a terrifying weakness in the exact area Aston Martin had revised. Subscribe to the channel. The first session was supposed to give Aston Martin its clearest picture of the new car. Instead, it gave the team a warning it could not ignore. Lance Stroll had completed only 11 laps when the suspected problem appeared at the left rear of the AMR26. There were roughly 20 minutes remaining. He was still working through the opening program. His best lap had been set on the hard tire, which meant Aston Martin had not yet reached the point where the car's true one-lap performance could be judged. Then, between turns 2 and 3, everything changed. The rear of the car stepped away. Stroll spun. The session was stopped. And the red flag immediately turned Aston Martin's most important upgrade weekend into a mechanical investigation. The team's official explanation was careful. Lance had to stop the car because of a suspected left rear suspension issue. That word, suspected, was crucial. Aston Martin had identified the area of concern. It had not confirmed the exact cause. And without that answer, nobody inside the garage could treat the incident as a simple mistake or an isolated spin. Because this was not a normal specification of the car. Aston Martin had arrived in Hungary with its largest upgrade package of the season. 16 new pieces. A revised front wing. A new nose. A complete floor. A diffuser. And a slightly revised rear suspension. The rear suspension was one of the areas that had changed. Then the first major failure appeared at the left rear corner. That does not prove the new part caused the problem. The source does not establish that connection. The failure could have come from an isolated component. It could have involved damage. It could have come from assembly. It could have been unrelated to the revised specification. But the timing forced Aston Martin to investigate every possibility. Imagine replacing several important parts in a machine, then hearing a violent noise from one of the exact areas you changed. You cannot immediately blame the new component. But you cannot ignore it either. That was the position Aston Martin found itself in. The package was supposed to generate performance data. Instead, the engineers were now searching for evidence of what had gone wrong. And Stroll's position at the bottom of the timing screen did not tell the full story. He finished 21st. He was 4.396 seconds away from the fastest lap. That gap looked disastrous. But it could not be treated as a fair measure of the upgrade. Stroll's session ended early. His best time came on the hard tire. He never completed the full run plan. He never reached the stage where Aston Martin could compare his strongest lap with the leading cars. So the team lost more than track position. It lost information. That is one of the worst things that can happen during the debut of a major upgrade. Every new component creates questions. Does the front wing give the driver more confidence? Does the new nose improve the airflow? Does the full floor create more stable grip? Does the diffuser strengthen the rear of the car? Does the revised suspension help control the platform? Those questions cannot be answered in the garage. They require laps. Repeated laps. Different fuel loads. Different tires. Different corner speeds. Stroll completed 11. Then the program stopped. Aston Martin had brought 16 new pieces to the circuit, but one mechanical problem had taken away the time needed to understand them. And the red flag was only the beginning. Fernando Alonso was still on the circuit in the second AMR26. Normally, that would have given Aston Martin a way to continue its work. One car damaged. One car still running. The engineers could gather data from Alonso and compare it later. But after Stroll's failure, the team could no longer allow Alonso to attack normally. He was told to avoid the curbs. That instruction revealed the level of concern immediately. Curbs are a normal part of a Formula 1 lap. Drivers use them to open the corner. They use them to shorten the line. They use them to carry speed. Avoiding them means sacrificing performance. It means driving with caution. It means gathering data under conditions that may not match qualifying or the race. But Aston Martin had a larger concern than lap time. Until the team understood the suspected suspension issue, it needed to protect the second car. Curbs create sudden vertical loads. The wheel moves sharply. The suspension compresses. The car is forced to absorb the impact. That does not mean a curb caused Stroll's failure. The source does not say that. But Aston Martin's instruction showed that the team wanted to reduce those loads while the investigation continued. And that changed Alonso's entire program. He was no longer testing the upgrade at its limit. He was testing it under restriction. That distinction matters. A new floor may create more downforce when the driver uses the full width of the circuit. A new diffuser may perform best when the car is positioned aggressively through a corner. A revised suspension may be designed to support the car over the normal racing line. If Alonso had to avoid the curbs, Aston Martin could not evaluate the package in the way it had planned. The upgrade was on the car, but the team could not use the car normally. Then Alonso reported vibrations. Not a single brief sensation. Vibrations through the program. The source does not identify their cause. It does not say they came from the suspension. It does not confirm they were connected to Stroll's failure. They may have come from another area entirely. But after one car had already stopped with a suspected rear suspension issue, every unusual vibration became important. The engineers had to ask whether the sensation was harmless. Whether it came from the tires. Whether it came from the track. Whether it came from the new parts. Or whether it was another warning. And Alonso knew what had happened to Stroll. That knowledge changes how a driver experiences the car. Imagine being told your teammate's car suffered a suspected suspension failure. Then you return to the circuit in an almost identical machine. You feel a vibration. The team tells you to avoid the curbs. Even if the vibration turns out to be harmless, the possibility remains in your mind. At Formula 1 speed, trust is not optional. A driver must believe the wheel will remain controlled. He must believe the suspension will absorb the load. He must believe the car will react the same way every time he attacks a corner. If that belief weakens, the driver begins leaving margins. A little less speed over the edge of the track. A little less aggression on entry. A little more caution when changing direction. Those margins protect the car. They also hide its true performance. Alonso finished first practice in 13th. He was 2.475 seconds away from the fastest lap. Again, the position looked poor. Again, the context mattered. He had been told to avoid the curbs. He had reported vibrations. Even on the soft tire, he continued staying away from them. That meant Aston Martin ended the session without one clean performance reference. Stroll's program had ended through damage. Alonso's program had been restricted by precaution. The timing screen showed 21st and 13th. But Aston Martin still did not know how fast the upgrade truly was. That was the first major disaster of the day. Not simply the spin. Not simply the red flag. The loss of a reliable answer. The package had arrived to reveal performance. Instead, it created uncertainty. And uncertainty is especially damaging when 16 parts are introduced together. With a small update, the team can compare one new component against the old one. The change is easier to isolate. If the car improves, the team knows where the gain came from. If it becomes worse, the new part can be removed. A package this large is more complicated. The front wing affects the nose. The nose affects the airflow toward the floor. The floor affects the diffuser. The diffuser influences rear stability. The rear suspension helps control the platform underneath all of it. Each part may depend on the others. That makes the potential gain larger. It also makes the investigation harder. If the car behaves unexpectedly, which component is responsible? If the rear suspension fails, was the part itself weak? Was the load different because of the new floor? Did the diffuser change the forces at the rear? Did the car strike something? Was there a manufacturing problem? Was there an installation issue? The source does not provide the answer. But those are the types of questions the team had to work through. And it had to do that while the clock continued moving towards second practice. The mechanics began assessing the damage. The engineers reviewed the data. The team needed to determine what had failed, why it had failed, and whether the second car faced the same risk. This was no longer a normal repair. A normal repair replaces the damaged part and sends the driver back out. A suspected suspension issue requires confidence. The team must know that the replacement is safe. It must know the failure will not repeat. It must inspect related components. It must decide whether the revised specification can remain on the car. And all of that takes time. Aston Martin did not have enough. When second practice began, Stroll's car remained in the garage. The team confirmed that there had not been enough time to repair the damage from the first session. That one sentence exposed the scale of the impact. Stroll did not lose a few minutes. He lost the entire second session. No soft tire run. No longer run. No setup comparison. No opportunity to rebuild confidence. No chance to understand whether the repaired or revised car behaved differently. For a driver, missing second practice is damaging on any weekend. On the debut weekend of a 16-part package, it is devastating. Second practice is often where teams collect some of their most useful Friday information. The track is faster. The The drivers begin pushing harder. The teams test qualifying style runs. They also study longer stints to understand tire behavior. Stroll missed all of it. That meant Aston Martin lost half of its expected data at the exact moment it needed twice as much. One driver could have tested one setup direction. The other could have tested another. One could have used more front wing. The other could have tried a different ride height. The engineers could have compared the new suspension behavior across both cars. Instead, only Alonso could continue. And his earlier running had already been affected by vibrations and the instruction to avoid the curbs. That left Aston Martin trying to understand its biggest upgrade through incomplete evidence. But the most alarming moment came when the team was asked whether Stroll would be able to complete the rest of the weekend. A confident answer would have reduced the pressure. The team could have said the damage was understood. It could have said the parts would be replaced. It could have confirmed Stroll would return. Instead, Aston Martin said it would find out later. The team did not have the information at that moment. That response revealed how uncertain the situation remained. The exact condition of the car was still unclear. The repair timeline was still unclear. Stroll's participation was still unclear. And the relationship between the failure and the new package was still unclear. That is almost the worst possible position for a team introducing its largest development step of the year. Because Aston Martin was not only trying to repair one car. It was trying to decide whether it could trust the upgrade on both cars. And then Lawrence Stroll arrived in the garage. The owner of Aston Martin. Lance Stroll's father. The person who had invested enormous resources in turning the team into a contender. He personally inspected the damage. That moment showed how far the concern had spread. This was not being treated like a routine practice issue. The team owner wanted to see what had happened. His son's car had stopped. The biggest upgrade of the season had suffered a major setback. The second car had been placed under precaution.